Now, in our current bank credit system, money is created as debt to banks. This debt is required to be repaid to the banks in money, either fiat cash or bank credit. Therefore, the ability of all borrowers to repay depends on the availability of fiat cash or bank credit. The supply of fiat cash is controlled by the nation's central bank, but fiat cash makes up only a very small proportion of money. Usually about 95% of all money is bank credit. And who controls the availability of bank credit? The banks? Well, on the one hand, what the banks can do is constrict the supply of credit any time they want to, with high interest rates or by just not granting loans. On the other hand, the banks can lower interest rates and encourage borrowing, but they can't expand the money supply unless borrowers are willing to borrow. If cautious and reliable borrowers are in short supply, banks must take bigger risks, as interest must be paid to depositors and banks cost money to run. The bank credit money supply is, as they say, highly elastic. And because it's based on the willingness of borrowers to borrow and the reliability of borrowers' credit, it is vulnerable to both rapid expansion and drastic shrinkage. Also, everyone is legally obliged to pay in money. Now, money in reality is just an accounting of debt, and accounting follows strict rules, so the whole situation is governed by inflexible numbers. That's why a sudden shrinkage in the money supply caused by some defaults has the inevitable follow-up effect of causing more and more defaults and even more shrinkage of the money supply. This self-reinforcing downward suction leads us into economic collapse and the economic and social absurdity of unemployed, dispossessed people camping outside their empty, vandalized homes. And what does the government do about it? It loads bankrupt taxpayers with astronomical fantasy debt that will never even be reduced, never mind paid off. All this is done to fill up the negative balance sheets of the banks with money the banks never had in the first place. And then they use it to pay themselves obscene bonuses. Life is good for those who know how to play the system. The bailout scam was the biggest daylight robbery in the history of the world. So far. All of these tendencies of the money as commodity system are features of the system itself. The greed and corruption comes in as those who understand the system profitably surf the inevitable waves of boom and bust. Those who understand the system know what's coming and even precipitate it when the time is ripe for them to take advantage of disastrous mass events for their personal and political gain. But it's the structure of the system itself which gives them the opportunity. And they have taken this opportunity over and over again since ancient times. People complain of the injustice, blame each other, blame the left or the right or whoever the scapegoat of choice is. But they never really catch on to the reasons this keeps happening. That's because most of us shy away from trying to understand the true nature of money and of freedom. The basis of freedom is essentially the freedom to exchange goods, services, ideas. If you create something in proven demand, you and only you should have the right and the freedom to create and spend the credit money needed by someone to buy it. Money as a portable uniform commodity was invented a very long time ago. It was the only choice using the technological means available at that time. But times have changed. So why is this outmoded technology still the prevailing concept we have for money? Could we go beyond money as we've known it? Could there be a new basis, a fresh concept, a design that could more effectively address the real purpose of money in the 21st century? Awareness of the need for real change in the money system is growing. But what direction to take? What exactly is the problem, and how can it be solved? The safest and only real choice, many people argue, is to return to gold, or a gold standard, because this worked for millennia in the past. But gold itself is impractical for transactions in the modern world. It was impractical centuries ago, which is why the promise to pay gold system developed. And so it is certain that, in practice, transactions would be conducted in promises to pay gold, not gold itself. Thus, the promises to pay gold money will only be as reliable as the promises. So in reality, it isn't the gold that makes the system work. It's the reliability of promises. Would they be reliable promises? Maybe. But what we would be using as money would be like the old goldsmith's promises, made in the knowledge that only rarely does anyone ever ask for real gold. This was the problem with the goldsmith's situation. The real gold was seldom claimed, allowing fraudulent promises of gold to be made and used as money. Why would history not repeat itself if all the same elements remained in place? Another thing, what most people say they like about the gold system is that promise of gold money is a promise of a specific amount of real value. Now this is an odd idea, given that the vast majority of us have no use for gold. So how much real value can it have for us? Wouldn't a promise redeemable in food, clothing, or shelter be much more real? People also like the idea that gold is just gold, doesn't need a government to create it. However, it does need miners. In a gold money system, mining discoveries, jewelry making, industrial use, hoarding, and counterfeit bars of gold-plated tungsten would all influence the money stock. What on earth does any of that have to do with the need for money for trade? Lastly, gold as money is a single uniform commodity, manifesting all the inherent mathematical defects of lending demonstrated in part 1 of this movie. Being a coin with intrinsic value doesn't make any difference. A lot of gold and silver's appeal comes from a belief in an oversimplified version of history. People assume that coins were invented to standardize the inherent value of the metal they contain. This is true, but right from the beginning, some of the earliest coins were created based on a diametrically opposed idea. This was done because the rulers at that time foresaw the inevitable negative consequences of using limited supplies of precious metals as money. Therefore, they chose to avoid that route. Instead of precious metals, these rulers struck coins of iron or copper and defined their value by decree. What's more, these coins by decree were heated and dipped in vinegar, so the metal they contained would have no intrinsic value. These coins were in fact the original and true fiat money. They were merely tokens of value, money created by law and enforced by the ruler's authority.